I'm going to be reviewing my burn deck that I used for the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, and let's see. I'll start by reviewing the spell cards I use. First off, I have Wave Motion Cannon, which is a standard once per turn inflict 1,000 points to your damage, but it has to build up, so 3 turns deals in 3,000. Let's see. I use 3 of them. Set those off to the side. Chain Energy. Since this is a burn deck, it requires damaging my opponent's life points a lot. So by playing Chain Energy, this allows me to keep my opponent from playing a lot of the more powerful combos at the cost of their life points. So it's just kind of a bonus. And I use 2 of those. Let's see here. Heavy Storm is just your standard spell and trap destroyer. I only have one of those. Swords of Revealing Light, used for restricting their attacks for up to 3 turns. And I use 2 copies of Enemy Controller. Oops. Used to deflect attacks or change my opponent's monsters to defense mode. Then I have Brain Control. Good to pull off one of my opponent's stronger monsters so I can hit them with something weak. Foolish Burial. This card is used to send a monster from your deck to the graveyard. I use 2 copies of this, and you'll find out why whenever I get to the monsters. And last but not least, I have Burial from a Different Dimension. This card takes 3 removed from play cards and adds them back into my deck, or my graveyard. I only used one of these because that's all I had at the time. I'm going to move on to the traps. Quite a few of these. Ceasefire. This flips up every monster on the field, and for every effect monster in play, my opponent takes 500 points of damage. Magical Cylinder. Just bounces my opponent's attack right back at him. Reckless Greed. This is kind of used for an emergency draw. It lets me draw 2 cards, but for the next 2 turns I have to skip my draw phase. Spiritual Fire Art, Kurenai. I sacrifice a fire monster that I control, and its attack points is dealt to my opponent as damage. And like I said, whenever I get to the monsters, you'll understand why. Torrential Tribute, just kind of a standard destroy all monsters, keep the big ones off the field. Dimension Wall. This is one of the ones I like. It still counts as you taking damage, but instead of you taking the full extent of it, it's your opponent. And I use 2 of those. Zoma the Spirit. This is one of the trap cards that turns into a monster when played. When Zoma's destroyed in battle, whatever monster destroyed it, its attack points comes out of your opponent's life points. And I like to use 2 of those. Gravity Bind. Just kind of buy myself a couple turns using this, as long as it stays on the field. And Call the Haunted. This is just your standard revival card. Now we're going to move on to the monsters. Marshmallow. This thing's attack while face down. It deals 1,000 to my opponent, and it can't be destroyed in battle, so that's kind of a bonus. Then I got Spirit Reaper. It's pretty interesting. He can't be destroyed in battle, and if you can peg your opponent's life points with him, they have to discard a card. The problem is, if he even gets targeted by any spell, trap, or monster effect, he automatically is destroyed. So I've got to have some kind of drawback. Morphine Jar. This is good for a hand reload. That's what I like to use this for. Volcanic Slicer. That's a fire monster. It's got 1800 points, and if you decide not to attack, you can inflict 500 to your opponent, which makes it pretty useful. And by using Spiritual Fire Art Kurenai, I can shell out in total about 2,300 just using this. This effect, and I've used 3 of those. And Lava Glow. If my opponent brings out some of their strongest monsters, I contribute 2 of them to put this guy on their field, and they take 1,000 points of damage each turn. I use 3 of those in this deck. Works out pretty well. Gaia's Soul, the Combustible Collective. This is a fire monster with 2,000 attack points, also able to be used with Spiritual Fire Art. You can sacrifice 2 fire monsters to boost its attack points by 2,000, and it has the Fairy Meteor Crush ability, which means when it takes out a monster that has lower defense than its attack, the difference is inflicted to your opponent as damage. And Volcanic Blaster. This is used to take any volcanic monster in my deck and put it on top. This is kind of just a filler card right now because I can't think of anything else to put in there. And last but not least, probably the most important card in this deck is Volcanic Counter. If you take damage while this card and another fire monster are in your graveyard, you can remove Volcanic Counter from play to cause your opponent to take the same amount of damage that you would take in battle. And I use 3 of those, which is why I also use Burial from a different dimension. The win ratio of this deck is very high because it is a burn deck that does not use time stallers, which stalling for time is probably the biggest downfall of any burn deck. If all possible, check it out.